Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. This bonus show accompanies episode 200, Blind Ambition, How to Go from Victim to Visionary with Chad E. Foster. Episode 200 features Chad E. Foster, Red Hat executive, author of Blind Ambition, and motivational speaker.
A lot of people try and predict what big pile of cash they need to retire based on some complicated math of how long do I think I'm going to live? What do I think my cost of living is going to be? What will my pile of cash look like when I start retirement? What will my rate of return be based on a mixture of assets in my portfolio? What will the rate of inflation be? How much cash do I think I'm going to need for healthcare? Oh my God, the amount of complexity is dizzying.
A quick recap, Chad E. Foster is a high-impact motivational speaker. He's the author of the book Blind Ambition, in which he talks about losing his sight in his early 20s. But that didn't stop him from becoming the first blind person to graduate from the Harvard Business School leadership program or climbing the corporate ladder as a successful finance sales executive. If you haven't watched episode 200 yet, watch that first so you can get inspired. Learn how Chad talks about the importance of the stories that we tell ourselves. He's living proof that choosing the right story can be the difference between being a victim and being a visionary. In this bonus episode, I want to ask Chad about money. You see, he's been successful in corporate America because of his expertise in finance. He's also well-versed in deal strategy. I also want to ask him about his thoughts on saving for retirement. He has a plan that strives to generate passive income through real estate and self-managing those properties. I hope that you enjoy this bonus episode. Chad, you've won billions of dollars in contracts. How do you view money? Does it sometimes feel like a game?
Yeah, it does sometimes feel like a game. It feels like a game until it's yours, and then it gets really personal, right? It's a game that you don't like to lose when it's yours, but it is a bit of a game. But I think as much as possible, it's important to realize that there is a game and there are probabilities. You're playing probabilities, and there are outliers in probabilities, and there are things that are inside the bell curve and things that are outside the bell curve. So as hard as it is, you try to not take it personally and realize as long as I'm taking a calculated risk based on what the market can bear for something, and then I have to have faith in that and not be too deterred when something happens that's outside of the bell curve.
So you are a big data guy. You're always calculating the numbers. I guess that's what happens when you go from pre-med to business.
Well, yeah. Relying on instincts and emotions and all of that, it's helpful as long as it's informed by data. Well, instincts is helpful. I'm not sure emotions are really helpful. Instincts are great when they're informed by data, but a lot of what I did in one of my prior jobs, so think about this, we were going after multi-billion-dollar projects. And a big part of what I had to do was figure out what's the market for these services. And these are information technology services. And so things like you've got to go out and hire 1,000 people, and you've got to pay them different salaries based on whether they're network people or applications people or engineers or project managers or whatever. So you have all these different salary profiles. You have fringe and overhead and things that you give them. And maybe you've got some hardware that you have to purchase, things like data center servers and computers and all these things that complicate it. And then you've got network costs for running the LAN WAN environment, and maybe there's a mainframe in there. And then you've got to figure out, all right, what is the price for those services? And it depends on so much. It depends on the statement of work, which is always handcrafted by the customer. It depends upon the market that you're selling into. It depends upon the size of the environment and the amount of overhead costs that you have. That how do you fit all those pieces together? But you're trying to determine what's the winning price, and how are we going to make money in that market? And long term, do we even want to be in that market based on overhead rates and all these other things? And so it really is an exercise of, I need lots of data, but at the end of the day, no data is ever perfect. And so you end up having to triangulate on what you think is the best course of action based upon the pieces of data that you want to give the most gravity in the decision. And that's really where science blends with art. And you have to learn that some of this data is irrefutable, and some of it maybe I'm taking out of context. I have to be really clear-eyed about what data I'm taking out of context and how I'm letting my biases drive the decision. And for a lot of these deals we were going after, we knew that you make a wrong decision on $1 billion contract, it's not good news. People aren't really happy about that. If you make a wrong decision and let's say if you lose it, that's bad. If you win it and lose a lot of money at it, that's bad. So you have to figure out, how do you strike that balance? And a lot of it is finding data and figuring out which data to pay attention to, which data to ignore, how to triangulate on where you want to be. And that does, in many cases, boil down to instincts as well as data.
It sounds pretty crazy. That's a lot of money riding on the line when the data is like an unfinished jigsaw puzzle, and you're just working with what you've got and trying to make the best informed decisions. I know, like, for an individual,
that's what made it so fun, frankly.
When you're shopping, a lot of working with trying to put that puzzle together and play the strategy,
solving the puzzle, because you're trying to solve the puzzle of what is the answer, but then there's the answer, what I think of and I call the point of sale. So there's the point of sale for the transaction, and then there's the pre-sale. What are you going to do? Once you figure out what the answer needs to be at the point of sale, what are you going to do in advance of that to maximize your probability of winning? And then post-sale, what are you going to do to maximize your ability to generate a higher return than the point of sale would otherwise imply? And so it's it's solving the puzzle at the point of sale, but then blending that with an influence campaign and an execution campaign, so that you've got a pre-sale strategy, a point of sale strategy, and then an execution strategy, and you integrate all three of those in a way that they all lend themselves to one another, so that you can win the work at the right price, but then monetize in a way that's profitable.
What is that post-sale? What does that look like? That's selling additional services, or what kind of things? How do you add to the, potential money of that deal?
Well, you want to think about what you think is going to happen in the future that is not reflected on the piece of paper that you're reviewing. I'll give you an example. So we were going after a deal with a particular customer in the federal space, and in the request documents, the RFP documents, they asked for a certain level of service. Well, after a lot of research, I discovered that there would be a lot of congressional appropriations to this particular customer in the future that would dramatically raise their amount of funding in a certain area that was not really accounted for in the RFP. And so what you want to do in those cases is say, look, I know the RFP is asking for X. I know that within the next so many months, they're going to need Y. So I need to make sure that contractually I've got a vehicle to deliver Y and build that into our proposal for X. And so although our proposal for X says this dollar amount, we know that congressional appropriations are going to flow based on what's going to happen. And so therefore Y is actually going to be, Y is going to come to us. And so the aggregate is Z, right? You've got what they've asked for, what's coming, and then the blend of those over time, and making sure that you've got, in this case, the contractual mechanisms to actually bring that to life in a way without having to create a lot of friction with your customer, so that you can just seamlessly onboard those services as they become funded by the government.
It sounds like you're an awfully good chess player.
Well, I was probably better chess player when I could see the pieces. Sorry, can't resist. Once upon a time, I probably would have been better at chess than what I am now. But no, I like to think strategically and try to play several moves ahead. And if you can, and that's why when I mentioned the pre-sale strategy, you bring this data and this information. If you can figure this out ahead of time, you bring it into conversations 18 months ahead of time so that you can start laying the framework for creating those mechanisms, those structures, all those things that you're going to need over the next, call it 7 years. You know, you're a year and a half, 2 years before anything is officially out. You're looking at it, and you know you're preparing for the next 7 years. The 2 years once it's out, the RFP drops, and then you've got another 5 years of execution and really trying to integrate all those things. It was fun because it was complicated. There's a puzzle. There's the data piece of it. There's the analytics piece. Then there's also the gamesmanship and the strategy. And like you said, playing not just the checkers of the transaction, but the chess piece of end to end, you know, over a 7 to 10 year period.
And it's nice that it pays well.
That never hurts.
So I'm curious, like from the professional side to personal, how does this focus on data help you? Do you pay your mortgage down early?
No, I don't pay. I used to. I don't really pay my mortgage down early now because I believe in having options and optionality. And so I'm convinced I could pay my mortgage off early right now. We've got some vacation property and they're paid for. We've got a mortgage on my main residence, and at the interest rate I have it at, which is I think, I don't know, 2.75 or 3 or something like that, 3 and some change. It's so cheap to borrow money. And the amount that I could get in return off of an alternative investment, I'd rather have the cash just sitting there, even if I only earn, I don't know, whatever it is, 1 or 2% out of my money market or whatever, whichever investment vehicle I have it in. It's worth that, paying that interest. And then you get, of course, you get the interest deduction of mortgage interest as well. And I know they recently, they cut that a little bit. But I'll pay that interest on my mortgage just to have the option of having my capital there should an opportunity present itself, because I believe in having options. Because let's be reasonable. How many people are going to get excited about making an investment with a meaningful amount of money to earn 3%? I'm not. I'm interested in more than 3%. But if I spend my money on my mortgage, that's the maximum I'm going to get is 3%. Yes, I get to get rid of my mortgage payment, but what happens if a tremendous business opportunity presents itself to me in 2 years from now and I don't have the capital to take advantage of that? I'd much rather have the capital and the options to invest in something that could potentially return me 50% or 100% or even just 10%, which is higher than what I would get by paying off my mortgage.
So is your focus mostly on real estate investments? Tell us a little bit about your retirement savings strategy.
Well, my retirement savings strategy, I guess I should start by saying you always have to take the free lunches that the government gives you. If you're not taking free lunches that everybody's giving you, then you're leaving a lot of money on the table, and that's just silly. You have to take advantage. You have to maximize your 401k, especially if your employer matches you in any way. Not doing that is just throwing money away. So number one is maximize all of the free lunches, 401ks, HSAs, uh, IRAs. If you can get a SEP IRA, that's great. Maximize all those tax deferred retirement savings. And then 529s is another one, making sure that you take advantage of the college tuition accounts that you can create and earn in a tax deferred way at the state level. You have to do that first and foremost. The next sort of philosophical thing that I believe is a lot of people try and predict what big pile of cash they need to retire based on some complicated math of how long do I think I'm going to live? What do I think my cost of living is going to be? What will my pile of cash look like when I start retirement? What will my rate of return be based on a mixture of assets in my portfolio? What will the rate of inflation be? How much cash do I think I'm going to need for healthcare? It's like, oh my God, the amount of complexity is dizzying. And frankly, the return that you get in a lot of those situations is not extremely compelling. And so rather than spend all of my time trying to calculate what that would be or invest in that sort of an approach that anchors to liquidity, I'm more interested in creating a portfolio of real estate that generates passive income. And that's what we've started doing. And if you think about vacation properties, I prefer short-term rentals and vacation properties over long-term rentals because long-term rentals tend to come with more headaches, having to deal with tenants and all of the complexities of getting them in and out, and if they pay, if they don't pay. I prefer a vacation property because if you don't pay, you don't get in. It's just I get to consolidate headaches, and so I would much rather have a portfolio of vacation properties where I can consolidate my headaches. I can earn 12 or 15% return every year, and then as long as I stay within the IRS limitations of my time there, and I think it's 14 days. Then every time I go there, I take care of maintenance and everything else, and it's a tax deductible expense because it's a business. So my strategy is to accumulate a portfolio of vacation properties in places that my wife and I like to visit, that we can go and use as we maintain it, and we can rent it when we're not using it, and we can create a level of passive income that doesn't require I predict how big our pile of cash needs to be. Instead of saying, all right, how long do I think I'm going, how long or how quickly am I going to burn down my cash? The calculation just simply is, what is the amount of passive income I think I need to retire? Okay, well, based upon that, how many assets do I need to accumulate? If I'm earning 10, 12, 15% passive income off of my assets, how many of those do I need? How much money do I need to save up to buy those assets and create that passive income stream? And then I don't have to predict how long we're going to live or what's going to happen with inflation. If inflation goes up, I can charge more in rental income. If we live longer, the asset is owned. It's good into perpetuity. As long as people want to rent, then we're fine. The other thing is I don't really care if the asset goes up or down in value as long as there's still demand to rent the asset. So it's not about capital appreciation as much as it is about not having lazy assets in the portfolio.
With the short-term rentals, do you take advantage of Airbnb or VRBO?
We use VRBO. Yeah, I'm not as inclined to do Airbnb yet. We're fine with VRBO. The thing that I try to do is use longer term rentals, meaning not long term, not a month or two, but we try to rent to families because when you're younger, maybe you're not as attentive. Like, for example, spring breakers, right? Depending on where you're at and how much fun they have, let's say it like that, you could end up with a little more damage than is worth to actually rent it out. So we try to be in areas where there's more family fun activity and a little less spring break party activity. And so we've found that there's generally some correlation between length of stay and the amount of partying that goes on. And so, yeah, we have a minimum of 7 days. So we don't want to rent it for a night or 2 nights or that tends to bring a little more headache. And if you think about getting it cleaned and having somebody come in and take care of it and inspect it and all that, that's a lot of churn for just a couple of days. So we try to, we try to balance the business model with also the amount of headache that it creates, because at the end of the day, I am about consolidating headaches, and the more I can just eliminate the headaches associated with something, the more compelling it is to do. So I'll take a little bit less return to have significantly less headaches.
I love the idea that your assets are working for you and that you're building this portfolio of assets. So then in retirement, what does that look like? Then you and your wife get to travel to different places.
That's right. As we earn enough income in retirement to supplement my regular earnings and income, so we have enough, we don't have to compromise our lifestyle. And in fact, we get to travel to the places we want to travel. So whether that's at the beach or in the mountains or in Europe or wherever we want to go, we get to travel. And depending on how long we stay, it probably won't be a tax write-off by the time we get to retirement, because we won't be staying there for less than 2 weeks. But while people aren't using it, we'll go use it and take advantage of that and earn income while it's not being used. And that to me sounds like a pretty good way to spend a retirement. I love to travel. My wife loves to travel. I love to experience new cultures. And so it sounds, it seems, at least on the surface, like it should be a pretty decent way to spend retirement, as opposed to, like I said, just trying to predict how much cash you're going to need. And so we're building that. And there are mechanisms you can use. And I haven't clicked down completely into this. There's a self-directed IRA. I need to get a little bit smarter about that. I do believe there are some restrictions that I'm not extremely fond of, meaning they don't allow you to use or manage a self-directed IRA, but you can take an IRA, put it in a self-directed IRA, and then invest that in rental property. The thing is, you have to have a real arm's length relationship with that property, which takes some of the sizzle out of it for me. So we've not gone that route yet. I'm not that thrilled about not being able to use it. That's half the benefit, is being able to use it too and manage it.
In investing in different properties, in your experience, any lessons learned? Like, did you ever rent to spring breakers, or you had the foresight not to do that?
We had the foresight. Maybe I've had the fear to not do that, because you see the war stories of what happens on spring break. Look at this last spring break in Miami as an example. It was all over the news. You don't have to look too far. But I think the lessons learned from my point of view is, number one, get in a community. Because especially if you're on the beach, if you're in a community like a condo, then you have a maintenance crew on site all the time. You don't have to call people out for one-off events to look at your air conditioner, to look at a leak, whatever. You've got maintenance on call. It's really sustainable. You've got people to take care of things like your swimming pool, your hot tub. You've got a gym there. You get to share the cost of things like hurricane insurance. If you're in a standalone unit and you're the only person responsible for your structural insurance, that can be a pretty hefty bill. But if you're in a community and you get to share the cost of the most expensive insurance item, which is your hurricane or wind insurance, that becomes a lot more palatable. And so it's managing all of those costs in a way that provides you what you want, what you really want. Do you really want to have to worry about cutting the grass or getting somebody to cut the grass for you? Or do you just want a place that, kind of takes care of itself? It sends you some money when you when it's time to rent, and then when you want to go visit, you don't have as many headaches. So from my point of view, doing it in a community first makes a lot of sense, especially when it's far away and you're not around. You have more people to keep an eye on it and help manage it for you. And then all you need at that point is somebody you can really trust to go in and clean it and inspect it, make sure it's good, and use technology to keep the key system usable, get an August smart lock, things that you can program remotely. If you wanted to put a camera system in the shared space, you could do that. We personally don't choose to do that, but having your system online to where you can control the entry and the exit for guests as they need to, whether it's through VRBO and then sending codes to people as you can program it remotely. You can be, how many ever 100 miles away you want to be, creating a sustainable management system that allows you to keep on top of it without too much work, right? Mailing keys back and forth, you don't really want to be in the business of doing that. So invest the time and the money up front to instrument it with the right system so that it provides you a little more freedom once you get into the normal course of business.
Yeah, technology is great. Do you work your Excel spreadsheets when evaluating properties in the similar way that you did with government contracts?
Not nearly as intricately. I don't need to as intricately, but I use Excel to evaluate them. So I'll take the purchase price, and then I'll throw the purchase price into a model, and I'll run an amortization table on it and see what my payment's going to be based on the APR. Make some assumptions about costs like property insurance and electric, and if there's cable and HOA and all these things to generate my monthly payment and figure out what the annual cost is going to be. And then I'll do some research top down to say, based on listings for VRBO or Airbnb around this property comparable to it, what are the going rates for rental? And if they have historical rentals, then I'll look at that, meaning if the seller has that, then I'll look at that and consider that. But I approximate what I think top down the revenue is going to be. Bottoms up, I calculate what the cost is going to be. Then I'll figure out, all right, how much do I think I need to put down to get it down to an appropriate business model with the appropriate amount of risk. And my rule of thumb is I want to put enough down to where I can at least get a line of sight into a 5-year payoff. And what I like to do is I like to create a payment that I can make myself, and I take all of the rental income as a net and put that down towards principal. And so if I can get a path, a line of sight to a 5-year payoff on the property, then I do it. And if I can't, then I probably won't. So it's getting that. There's a formula that I've got in my mind that I feel good with. It's putting 30 or 40% down, looking at the payment, making sure the rental income is solid, and then creating a path to getting to a 5-year payoff. If it happens in 4 years, great. If it happens in 6 or 7 years, no big deal. It's still paid off. And then once you start accumulating these properties, your first one stands on its own. Well, once you get your second one, you've got 2 income streams to put towards that second one. So it pays itself off twice as fast. Your third one, 3 times as fast. So all of a sudden, you start to build velocity with your ability to pay them off. And then once you've accumulated a portfolio, you can either continue buying more property into perpetuity, or you can just decide, you know what, I'm good with working now. I don't really have to work. I think these bring in enough money to where I can choose what I want to do as opposed to maybe what I have to do.
Well, thank you for those insights. Sounds very prudent.
It's
thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate the extra chat.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure.
Go ahead. You were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a strategy that seems to work for us so far. We just have to stay on the path. Now, these last couple of years, it's a little bit of evaluating opportunity costs and what do you think is going to happen with the market. And if any of us could predict that with 100% certainty, we would be on our own island, and enjoying all that life has to offer. But right now, it's anybody's guess as to just how long the market can continue, because it continues to climb, and the real estate market in particular continues to climb, and trying to guess whether or not it's going to come down or not. I'm talking with some friends and family members about this, and they're evaluating, should I buy now, should I not buy now? And I look at them and say, well, if you're going to buy a property, let's just call it $500,000. And if you think that property could earn you $100,000 a year, as an example, and if you think in 2 years that property may depreciate because the market drops by, let's say $100,000, it drops by 20% in 2 years, you could buy it at $400,000. Well, if you're looking at it that way, you still have to consider that if you buy it now, you're going to earn $100,000 in cash, $50,000 a year. between now and then. So you would actually break even in that situation. You buy it now for 500, you earn 50K a year on it for 2 years, and then the value drops by 100K. You've broken even because you've earned 50K in cash each year you've had the property. So it's not as simple as, do I think the market's going to drop? It's, what else could I be doing with my money in the meantime as the market drops? And then what does that point look like in the future?
It's nice that the math works, so you don't have to make emotional decisions.
Yeah, anytime you start blending emotions with money, it doesn't usually end well, does it?